Hello, everybody, and welcome to Get in Tune. I'm Michael Gracia, and tonight I have someone I'm very happy to talk with. I've known him for a few years through cons. I've been a fan of his work. I've actually purchased a bunch of his work, and I have it near me, which I'll be pulling out in a bit. But I want to bring on Bill Walko. So, hey, Bill, how you doing?
Hey, what's up, guys?
So, before we even begin, I want to show you this. I remember, I just got to pull it out. It's on the side here. I am a big fan of your work. I met you, God, what's it been now? So let's see, around 2012. I think it was like the first Terrificon or like Connecticut. It was in Connecticut, and my wife and I went to a show. It was at a hotel. And I'm like, wow, I just loved your stuff. I remember I bought some prints from you, which are packed away in another area. But I followed your work. You do a book or a strip called The Hero Business, which we'll get to. But I want to say, was it a year or two ago? You did a Kickstarter for it, and I contributed. So I have all the Hero Biz books that you had out at the time here. There's four. There's the special one here. I have the trade. I got your sketchbook here. In addition to that, I have the print that you sent, and I think this might still be the stuff you sent it in. With
it's still mint in package. It's like a 9.8.
another Walko, and then the postcards. And actually, your postcards is something I purchased a lot in the past of. I have quite a few of your postcards, but these are beautiful pieces of work. Whoops. I actually have that one somewhere. Might be hanging in the studio.
Yeah, I'm a huge Teen Titans fan, as most people know.
Yeah. So I just want to say I am a big fan, and I've been looking forward to chatting with you about art and just your work for a very, very long time.
Oh, cool. Yeah, good to hear. Yeah, I think it was 2012. I think it was Terrificon at the Stanford Hotel.
Possibly. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Honestly, that's when it was.
Yeah. So, before we get into the hero business here, can you talk about with me some of your, like, what got you into comics? What were some of your influences?
My influences were what really got me into comics was the Teen Titans, specifically the new Teen Titans, the Wolfman Perez run. Yeah. So that was like life-changing for me. That really kind of got me to be like a comic book collector and a fan. Prior to that, I was a fan of Spider-Man through like cartoons and stuff like that. And then also, when we visited my grandmother, she would have Archie comics in her like living room for us to read. And they were the same 12 Archie comics that every time we went there, we would just reread them again. Because this was before the age of, people having computers in their hands. Yeah. So we read those Archie comics over and over. So Archie comics kind of holds a special place in my heart. So that's kind of, the Teen Titans, though, is what got me hardcore into comics. Because from there came like X-Men and Legion of Superheroes and Avengers and Fantastic Four and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, and from some of your work, you're also a big Legion fan, right?
I'm a pretty big Legion fan. I'm more of a Titans fan. It probably goes Titans, then X-Men, then Legion.
Okay. Yeah. I just remember seeing some of your work, and there was some Legion.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I did the one with them playing volleyball, and I've done some other Legion pieces. The tough thing with Legion is there's so many of them. So either you're just doing a spotlight picture, or you're kind of committing to doing a lot of them.
Yeah. So, so you got into comics as a young kid, obviously. Were you drawing back then?
Yeah.
So was that something you did even before you got into comics?
Yeah, I was always like an artist kid. I think since like the age of 5, I was always drawing pictures. And I think the comic connection just heightened it. So I would try to copy the pictures that I saw in the comics and kind of draw my own version of them. Probably again starting with Spider-Man, and then the Teen Titans and the X-Men, and drawing my versions and studying the artists I liked and trying to sort of copy their style. Although I'm no George Perez and he's really hard to copy. So you know.
Yeah, to me he's. I always call him like the Rembrandt of comics, because I remember talking with some of my students once about his work and the way he draws crowd scenes, and there are some Rembrandt images of crowds, and I'm like, just amazing, you know.
Oh yeah. Well, and there was a poster he came out with of the Titans like in the 80s, and I remember just looking at.
Oh, you got froze for a second here.
The most minute detail of that poster.
I'm sorry, you froze for a moment. Can you repeat what you just said?
Am I good?
Yeah, you're good now.
Yeah, I was just saying that there was a poster. People remember, like in the 80s, George Perez came out with this Teen Titans poster, and it had this phenomenal level of detail. And I remember studying that, like the Zapruder tapes, just like looking at it and like looking at every line, and just trying to copy it and being like, I want to be this good. This guy's crazy good. So yeah.
Wow. So Titans, obviously, big thing. It was actually an influence. It was one of the first books I think I actually bought too. Was a Teen Titans annual. Because before I got into comics, I was always a strip guy, but I remember going to the comic shop and I bought this Batman annual. I bought this Teen Titans annual, and it was like a Secret Origins. It was the retelling of the story of Nightwing, and I'm like that.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
That was my introduction to the Titans, really.
Wow, that's a big info dump.
Yeah,
because that was the origin of the Teen Titans. That was like all their post-crisis redone history.
Yeah, so that was, and I'd buy back issues afterwards because they became one of my favorite as a kid too.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you've been drawing. When did you decide that, hey, I want to make comics? And what was your first venture into the comic world?
So I kind of dipped in, and then I dipped out, and then I dipped back in. So like when I was in college, I did a comic strip and dabbled with that a little bit. And then I did my own sort of like homemade comic that I developed a little bit and shopped around. And then I got a full-time job. So I started working for agencies, like marketing agencies. So I kind of dipped out at that point.
Whoops. I got you frozen again here. If you can hear me, everybody, I apologize. Hold on. Uh-oh. Hold on. Let me see if I can let him know.
Can you see me now?
Yeah, you just freeze and everything stops. I'm sorry. So you were saying you got a job with marketing agencies, and then that's when you kind of cut out.
Then, well, that's when I cut out of doing comic book illustration. So I cut out for a little bit, but then I kind of got the itch because I love comics, and I'm like, well, what can I do? How can I get back into this? And web comics were the huge thing, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'll make my own web comic and just sort of see where that goes. And I developed my own web comic, which we'll get to, I guess, in a minute. But from the web comic, I kind of developed this whole other art style that I hadn't really done before, and it's become my style. So, interesting journey.
Actually, speaking of your style, I was going to bring it up. This style that you draw in, it's very stylized. When I look at it, I feel you're even more like a cartoony, toned down Bruce Timm. Would you say that is, was Batman the Animated Series a big influence? Yeah.
So it's funny because when I was developing the hero business as a comic, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to devote the time to actually draw it. I was going to just write it, and I actually tried to get an artist for a while, and I'm like, maybe I'm not the artist for it. And then I'm like, well, what can I do for this concept to kind of really make it all come together? And I'm like, well, maybe I should do a simpler style. Maybe it should look more like a cartoon. So I kind of was more in the camp of doing it like a comic strip, kind of Archie-like style. But because I'm also such a fan of Bruce Timm, a lot of that sort of snuck in. So it's sort of a melding of like classic Dan DeCarlo Archie with Bruce Timm in there is where we ended up. So that's the style I came up with Hero Business, mainly so I can also maintain a schedule on it. You know, so
Yeah.
I kind of threw out the George Perez style, which
Mhm.
takes a long time, and I sort of simplified and streamlined it, which really works though. The funny thing is that style, there's nowhere to hide, so you really kind of make the lines work for you because each line sort of means a lot. So if you kind of screw up, it's obvious, which, you know, so it's deceptively simple in that way. So there's a lot of learning. My first story doing it, I hit a lot of like learning blocks that I kind of got past. So that's kind of how it developed.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, so what's interesting though is the character design of Hero Business is just as you described. It's sort of like a simple cartoon style. It's like a stripped down Bruce Timm.
Yeah.
But then as I started doing more other work outside of the Hero Business, that stuff looks more like Bruce Timm and looks a little bit more realistic proportioned. So now my Hero Business style is something that's different from my other style. It's kind of a weird evolution.
No, but that's great. It just shows, well, it shows variety, which is all awesome. But it shows just how different work is based on, you know, just what you're doing, where your mindset is, what your final output is. This one here is Hero Business is a webcomic, and it's meant to be a little simpler than, you know, than your other stuff. And
right, yeah, it's a little bit more the comic strip style, you know. Whereas now that I've done more like comic book pages, there's more detail in them, and you know, the emotional acting is different. It's a little more realistic versus doing like a cartoon reaction to things with the sweat beads coming out of your head and things like that.
Which tends to be more of what I actually do with that stuff.
Yeah, it's like we're style cousins in that way, like Hero Business and your style, I think.
So tell us about the Hero Business. How did it come to be? Give us a little pitch, if you will, about the.
Sure.
Before I forget, I actually did forget. Usually I run, you know, your contact info. You guys go down, look below, follow him on Instagram, on Twitter. Go to his website, read the Hero Biz. It's a great strip. So I'm sorry. Please give the pitch.
No problem. So, you know, they say, you know, write what you know about. Yeah. So when I was developing a comic and a web comic, I'm like, well, what can I do? I wanted it to be a comedy. I wanted to almost feel like a sitcom with superheroes in it. That's kind of where my head was at with it. And I'm like, well, I need a setting. Like I need a reason for all these characters to come together. And I was playing around with some different sort of ideas. One was they're on a reality show, but I'm like, that's kind of been done. And another one was that maybe they're all under house arrest, like maybe they're all sort of under some arrest situation. But that was a little bit complicated to explain everything. I'm like, well, maybe they work together, but where would they work? And I'm thinking that through. And I wanted there to be a superhero and a supervillain. Kind of that used to be arch enemies, and they had to work together. They had to interact. So I'm like, well, how could that happen? I thought, oh, well, maybe the villain's on parole and he has to work there. So as I was going through this, I'm like, well, what's the setting? Like, what workplace would they be in? And I'm like, well, I've been working for marketing agencies for like 10 years now. Why don't I set them at a marketing agency? And that sort of opened up this whole storytelling, you know, all this sort of potential, because when you start to clash the business end of our world with the ridiculousness of superheroes, it started to be some funny things to be found in that. So similar to things like Futurama, you know, where it's like they kind of meld the mundane with the extraordinary, and that's where they kind of get a lot of jokes and humor from it. I'm like, oh, it's the same type of thing. You take an office environment, and then you take the ridiculousness of comics and superhero life, and you throw that in, and then it starts sort of writing itself, and the characters kind of came to life. So that's kind of how it came about. And then I thought of the tagline, which is with great power comes great marketability, which I think kind of sells it pretty well.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And just tell us a little bit about some of the main characters that people can find in there. And if you don't want to, I mean, you don't talk about how you came up with them, but just who are some of the characters that they'll find reading your strip? Yeah,
so thinking in terms of the great sitcoms that I loved, which is stuff like Cheers and, you know, classic shows like that, where they have a good cast of characters that kind of bounce off each other. I wanted there to be a cast where if you throw any two of them in a room or a situation, it'd be interesting or funny. So the first ones I thought of, like I said, was The main guy is Bravado. He's sort of like a Superman type character, but he's got a huge ego. Then you got his arch villain, which is kind of like a Lex Luthor type. His name is Dr. Malefactor, and he hates working there. He works for the R&D department, but he hates every minute of it, and he has to work for his worst enemy, which kind of stinks. And then you've got Simon, and he's kind of the scheming character. So he's always got these underhanded deals and these secret side deals. It's very unscrupulous. Then you've got Morgan, and she's kind of like a type A boss lady who's a nice person, but she's a little bit type A. So that's her sort of Achilles heel.
Yeah.
And then you've got Brody, who's the art director, who is sort of the heart of the whole series. And, you know, he's the artist. So a lot of his experiences might sort of be some of my experiences with clients. So I get some humor from that. And then finally, the last character is Parker, and she's the receptionist, and she's super important because she's got a big secret. So she starts in the first issue, and by the end of that issue, we learn what her secret is, and that kind of propels a lot of the storylines for the series.
Yes, and I remember all that. So I won't spoil anything. I want you guys to go and go to theherobiz.com and go back and read all this stuff. It really is a fun strip. You know, you've done other things. We'll just move on real quick, but tell us about My Moments with Stan. Yeah,
so that was a really, really great project that I was honored to be a part of. So basically, I don't know if you guys, the audience might not know this, but when certain celebrities get older in age, they start preparing obituaries, not to be morbid, but that's just kind of what happens. They want something ready to go when that person's time has, passed. So with Stan Lee getting up in years, they were like, some news outlets were preparing some of that material. And the New York Times had a really interesting idea. They wanted to do a comic book style obituary for Stan, a tribute of sorts. So they had Brian Michael Bendis lined up to do the script. And originally he was going to draw it sort of Fortune and Glory style. He did a book called Fortune and Glory, which he wrote and drew, and that was kind of the original plan. But he was too busy and he couldn't do it, so they needed an artist. So one of the editors at the New York...
Hold on, we lost you again, if you can hear me. I'm sorry, you guys, I don't know. We'll hold it off here. I'm just going to let you know. Let me let him know privately. We lost you again. We lost you at the part where you said one of the editors, and then you cut out again. And you're cutting out now. This is... Oh, guys, I apologize for this. I don't know whose end this is. Let me just see. Okay. I'm just letting him know. So we'll give it a minute. I do apologize. But this is great stuff here. Bill, like I said, has fantastic work. He's done tons and tons of stuff. Let me see if I could... Oh, he left. He's going to probably try. I was just letting him know maybe he should log out and then log back in. He's having some issues tonight. But number one, the Hero Biz comic. I love it. Like I said, I discovered it when I discovered his work. I hate to use the word discover because I didn't discover him. I found out about it when I met him at a show. And he's just been someone I've been following for a very long time. When I see him at shows, I chat with him for a few. We got comments coming in. It's a funny freeze. I don't know if it's a funny freeze, but we'll see. Let's see. Here he's back. Hello.
Back.
Yes, I was.
This worked better.
It's funny though. You froze the second I said the editor, then you cut out, and you're like, oh, and then cut out again. So
now I know this down pat. I could tell this, in my sleep.
So yeah, let's continue. We're on the My Moments with Stan.
Right. So the editor actually happened to be a big fan of my work, and he reached out to me, and he said, "Would you be interested in drawing the Stan Lee tribute?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, of course I would."
Yeah.
So that was a really, great project to be a part of, and working on that story, and drawing sort of this history of the times that Brian Michael Bendis met Stan Lee from a script from Brian Michael Bendis.
Yeah.
It was really, I was really pouring my heart and soul into it, and it was an amazing project. So it was also a strange situation where I couldn't say anything about it. And then Stan Lee passed, and then it was public knowledge. But until then, it was nothing I could talk about or share with anybody. So it was an unfortunate reason for it to be public. But when it went public, it was, it's a really special project to me. So it's probably like one of everything I've worked on in my life. It's like one of the things that's closest to my heart. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Let's move on to another character here. I just wrote down, I wrote down the stuff so I don't forget.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to the Jetta Raye Adventures. I mean, here's a character who has some history to her, and there is an update coming with her, and you're part of that. So
yeah. So this was a really interesting project. So people might not know the backstory. So if you're a fan of Archie comics, everybody knows that style and that classic Archie style. And some people, if they're Archie fans, they might know that Dan DiCarlo is one of the top, 3 Archie artists, maybe the top Archie artist.
He defined the look, really. I mean, I think
he defined the look after Bob Montana. Like really, everything moving forward was that Dan DiCarlo look. Yeah. So super important, decades of association with the Archie characters. His work is like flawless. It's crazy. He's an awesome cartoonist. So in the 50s, they tried to develop kind of like an Archie clone because Archie was very popular. So there's a lot of knockoffs. So one of the things they developed, which Dan DiCarlo actually worked on, was Jetta. It's just called Jetta. And it was sort of like a Josie and the Pussycats before Josie and the Pussycats. She was the lead character, a teenage girl with red hair. It was sort of like a female version of Archie. But the big twist was it was set in the far future. So it's sort of like if Judy Jetson had her own comic book done Archie style, sort of like the.
Oh, he froze again. I don't know. This I'm assuming it's from his side here. All right. Let's see if he can get back on. I do apologize, guys. We will get this going good. Wow, this is a long one, huh? So, you guys, you have any comments or questions for Bill that I can ask when he gets back? I mean, we'll talk still more about Jetta, but feel free to comment. I think it's we can ask a lot of cool questions. This guy has an awesome art, awesome work. I just love it. I mean, and by the way, if you guys, when comic book conventions come back and you're at a con and you see him, go visit him. He's really great stuff and great guy to talk with. All right. Sorry again about the freezing.
I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it's so we left off on basically what if Judy Jetson had her own show or her own comic in Archie style.
Right. So this was a series and it lasted less than 6 issues and it went away. But a group of people have decided to sort of resurrect it with a nice team of artists and creators involved. Yes. So Jim Turnus kind of put it together with a team of people, including guys like Jeff Schultz, who drew a bunch of issues of Betty and Veronica, the Kennedy brothers, who have done a bunch of work for Archie, and some other great talents that have sort of had a lot of connection with Archie comics and kids comics.
Yeah.
So they invited me along for the ride. So I did 3 stories for this anthology.
Okay.
And it just recently got crowdfunded. So it should be coming out, I'd say, probably by the end of the year or so. So that's been a really cool project. And of course, being a big Archie fan and having Dan DeCarlo be a big influence of me, doing something in that style and kind of following Dan DeCarlo and doing my best version of Dan DeCarlo was kind of a really fun experiment and a fun project to do. So
now, is Jetta done in your style that you drew it, or is you tried to do a little more Archie?
I did a classic Archie style. So
Okay.
yeah, and I want to do something kind of different. You know, I've done this Hero of Business style. I've developed my own style that's an offshoot of that. And I want to do something in the Archie style. Yeah. So this Jetta Raye Adventures is sort of my tribute to Dan DeCarlo.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Dan, you know, I gotta say, I knew Dan a little bit. I worked as a production artist for Archie for.
Oh wow, okay.
And Dan was just always great to chat with. He would bring in some of the most beautiful artwork I've ever seen, and you know, I remember. You know, I didn't chat with him long about it because I didn't get to talk with him much. You know, it was like he comes in, hi, how you doing? I take the pages, I photocopy them, get them ready for whatever. But I remember having an awesome conversation with him about his pinup art that he used to do in the 50s, like all that little because, and I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but I remember he came in and he had this picture of Betty, and she was in the shower. It was all steam, and it was her hair. She was like doing her hair, and it was just one of the most amazing illustrations I've ever seen in the Archie style of like that's basically a pinup, you know. And it was the intro splash page to a story. And I wish, to this day, I wish I took a photocopy for myself. You know,
I met Dan DeCarlo at a convention at some point.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to buy some artwork from him, but also I have a sketch of Veronica. Like I have like a little sketch from him. Like, yeah. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I never got that far with him. I was only there for about 3-4 months, so I only.
Yeah, it might be easier when you're a convention person and you're like, can you please draw something quickly? And this was the age before like everyone was getting all commissions and stuff.
Yeah.
So for me to come up with a book was actually like, it wasn't as much of a bother. And he did it for free, which is crazy.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I remember, just sidetracking for a second. I went to a show, I think it was in Connecticut. It was this very small show, and Jerry Ordway was there. And I love Jerry's work, and I'm a huge fan of when he did The Power of Shazam. And I didn't know he was going to be there, so I bought a new copy of the book. And he did a sketch in there for me of, well, Captain Marvel, because that's who he is. But it was just, and he just knocked now. Because I did ask him, I know it's Shazam now, but he's always Captain Marvel to me. And I asked him, I said, are you charging for an autograph or whatever? And he's like, are people charging it? I don't know. You're the first person I went to. But he just signed it for free for me and did this nice like bust shot of him. And I'm like, that was just awesome. You know, so it's great when you get that type of stuff from artists. And
and Jerry Ordway is like super nice. So
yeah. He's someone I eventually want to try to get on here and chat with, just because of how much of a fan I am of his.
Oh yeah. Well, hey, they just released that Power of Shazam book in hardcover.
Yes.
So maybe that's a good excuse to kind of get him to come out and talk about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to reach out to him. So anyway, we're on Jetta. So you changed up your style a bit, tried to do a new one. Do you know when the book will be released now that it's been funded?
I don't know the exact schedule. If you go to the Kickstarter for Jetta Raye Adventures, it probably gives more detail.
Okay.
I want to say I think it's either toward the end of the year or the beginning of 2021.
Okay. Yeah, that's something I'm looking forward to, because I follow the Facebook page. I didn't know about the Kickstarter when it was going on. Otherwise, I'm sure I would have contributed to get a book. So that is something I will want to purchase when it comes out.
Yeah, I think they also did an Indiegogo, and I think does Indiegogo work that you can still buy it? I think
I don't know. I gotta look.
Okay.
But Indiegogo, I think they do give you a time limit on there. I don't know.
Okay.
It's been a while since I looked at all these GoFundMe, Kickstarter, you know, whatever.
I'm just familiar with Kickstarter. I don't really know Indiegogo that well, so.
Yeah. So, okay, so you went from Jetta, and now you worked on another one, which might be a little
The other
more
end of the spectrum.
yes, it's not the kid friendly stuff. You're working on Stormy Daniels' Space Force.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's first start off with how did you get involved with this project?
Yeah, so the guy in charge of Tidal Wave Productions is a guy named Darren, who's just also been a fan of my work. I've done some commissions for him.
Yeah.
So I guess when he was developing this Stormy Daniels project, he did a bio comic of her, and I guess from there they actually met each other.
Okay.
So then they sort of, you know, got friendly or whatever, and they came up with an idea of doing another comic where she's sort of the lead character, and it's set in this sort of Space Force universe, playing off some real life events, maybe.
Okay.
Inspired by real life events, shall we say?
Yes.
So came up with that kind of comic idea. They're also pitching it to Netflix as an animated series. They're talking to them about it. So there's some things in talks right now. So this was all going on, and as this was going on, he wanted me to do something for this project, whether it's going to be a pinup or something. So I did what I wanted to be kind of like an old movie poster, kind of inspired by a sort of a Barbarella type thing, a really kind of almost like a retro movie poster, Star Wars meets Barbarella kind of thing. So when I did that, he really liked it, and it ended up being the cover for the first issue. So it's an alternate cover for the first issue, and I'm working on the cover for the second issue. So I'm not doing the interiors for this. I'm just doing some of the covers, like the variant covers. But you know, it's kind of a really kind of cool, fun project. It's very pinup style, cheeky kind of attitude. It walks the line. It's definitely a little risque, but it's not crazy risque.
Yeah. So since it's not crazy risque, what is the target audience? Are you looking at teens, adults? Because obviously it's not for kids, but
yeah, I'd say probably teen and up. It's yeah, it's not even rated R. It's maybe PG. Okay. Yeah, I read the first issue. It's PG.
And I know it's not out yet. When does it come out? Do you know? Or?
That one I believe hit stands in October. The first issue.
Okay, so not too far off.
Yep.
Is there anything about the story you can, like a pitch or anything you can tell us about it to make us want to buy the book?
Yeah, it's basically, you know, a Stormy Daniels like character who's thrust into this intergalactic situation with this sort of evil or overlord type guy, and there's a bunch of other fun characters in the mix, like a little droid and a little sort of Baby Yoda-ish creature. Okay. So it's sort of a pastiche of other sci-fi things, as well as being somewhat of a parody of some real life events things. I think they've described it as sort of Barbarella meets Star Trek. So it's got, you know, those kind of influences in them.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. It does sound like an interesting book. Definitely something I'm probably gonna pick up. I wanted to ask you, getting back to just quickly, My Moments with Stan. Is that still available for sale, and if so, where can we get that?
Yeah, it came and went as the Sunday edition. It was printed in the Sunday edition of the New York Times when Stan passed. When was it? Almost 2 years ago, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think it was in November of 2018, I want to say. But Brian Michael Bendis has his own creator-owned comics called Jinx World. And the story was reprinted as a backup in some of those Jinx World books around that time. Okay. So I think it's like number 5 of Scarlet, number 5 of Murder Inc. I'd have to look at the issues again. But it was actually printed in those Jinx World DC Comics issues. Okay. So you can find it there as well.
I'll have to look in those. And I'm sure if you want the New York Times edition, that's the one you're going to have to look on eBay for and pay.
That might be an eBay thing. If you do a search for it, though, it might still be on the website, because they did put it on their website as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. No, that's cool. Because, you know, I'll be honest, I didn't even know that happened in the comic. You know, I try to follow you as best I can, but I don't see everything.
Sure. Yeah. And who knows? It was around the holidays and crazy things were happening. And,
yeah. No. And so it is something that sounds like, and Bendis is one of my favorite writers, or at one point really was one of my top favorite writers that I really enjoyed reading. So let me just say, what is it like for you as an artist to take someone who is that, you know, if you want to say awesome as a writer, just to have that script, to read that script? It's almost, you know, it's like Marv Wolfman saying, here, can you draw my you know, story I wrote for Teen Titans or something? You know what I mean? Like, how does that feel as an artist for you?
Extremely intimidating.
But you did it.
Well, yeah, so the funny story was, at the time that we locked this in and we're talking about, I'm working with the editor. I don't know if you know this, it is public knowledge, I'm not revealing anything. But Brian Michael Bendis got really sick. He had this infection that he was in the hospital for. And like, he was really down and out for like over a month. Okay. So as I'm drawing this, because we're trying to make deadlines and trying to just get all this locked down, he wasn't very available because he was, you know, in a hospital bed pretty much. So we're working on the story, and, you know, we had to make a little bit of some nips and tucks here and there. So we're like, to me, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm changing things from his scripts. Like, I'm nervous about this. Like, is he going to come back and yell at me? This is crazy. Who am I to change these things?
Yeah.
So we did change it, and, you know, through the channels and everything, came back, and he ended up liking everything we did, and he's like, this is totally great. He co-signed everything, and he was awesome. You know,
that's awesome.
Really, you know, was a absolute joy and pleasure to work with. So everything turned out great. But for that little bit of time, I'm like, I'm changing things that I shouldn't maybe be changing.
I could see how that's nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
So, are you working on anything else besides the Hero Biz and the Stormy Daniels stuff? Anything else in the pipeline that you can talk about? Or, because I know you probably have some NDAs going on. And
yeah, I've got 2 NDA things that I can't really talk about right now. I hope they're public knowledge soon, and then I can talk about them. So one of them I'm in the thick of. One of them is sort of in the bag. So we'll see what happens with them. So right now, I'm working on the next book of the Hero Business. So I'm actually trying to get ahead in this weird pandemic year that we're in, where everything's weird and topsy-turvy. So I like to keep busy because this has been a weird year.
Yeah.
So having time on your hands is weird. So I've been getting ahead of myself with the Hero Business. So the 3rd book, I'm planning on launching the Kickstarter for that, either towards the end of this year or maybe the beginning of next year. So I've been really hardcore doubling down on that, as well as doing some other things.
Okay. And with the Hero Business, you're saying you're working on the next book. How many, you know, I'm looking here at the book that I have that I bought a while back. How many pages, or, I mean, because you do these in story arcs, like short story arcs. They're like, what, like 20 pages or so? So it's a webcomic you read. How often does it come out? I forgot to ask you that.
It comes out weekly.
Weekly, so it's once a week. So 20 weeks is really like one story. So the book you're working on, is this more of a collection of stories, like you know, a year's worth collected in one, or is it one like 20-week storyline?
Yeah, so I sort of treat them, I call them seasons, season 1, season 2, because I treat it almost like a TV show in my head, because it's really inspired by sitcoms. It's almost a sitcom first and a superhero series second. Yeah. So the first season had 6, I call them episodes, but they're 6 stories at like about 20 pages each. The second book season had 4 storylines that were a little over 20 pages each. The third season is broken down a little bit differently. I'm going to do more short stories. So they're more like 8 to 12 page stories. but there's
Okay.
going to be more of them. I'm going to do 8 stories for that book.
Yeah. And
So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, so it's just a little bit of a different rhythm. I'm experimenting with doing shorter stories that are more focused and a little bit more character driven, as a sort of like almost like half episodes.
And I don't remember if I asked you, but what year did you start publishing the hero business?
Yeah, so it was like 2011, I think, is the one that first hit.
Okay, so we're going.
We're almost up on the 10th anniversary.
Yeah, wow. And have you ever like put it on hold for a while because of other work, or you've been weekly just boom pushing it out?
I put it on hold here and there because other projects had sharper deadlines that I had to tackle. So sometimes I had to put it aside because I've got to do the money-making projects first.
Exactly.
But I've kept a pretty good pace with it. I don't think I was ever on hiatus for that long a period of time. And if you look at, like, the first book had over 200 pages. The second book had about 120 pages. The third book is going to also have about 120 pages. So there's a lot of material.
Yeah.
So also I can maybe announce it here or talk about it here. So the third book is actually going to conclude things.
Oh, so you're ending the strip?
Yep. So on the 10th anniversary, we're actually going to close the doors on the hero business. So a lot of things are going to get sort of wrapped up and addressed.
Okay.
But it might not be goodbye forever.
Yeah. But I mean, 10 years doing a strip is a long time. I mean, you think about like a strip artist who, I'm a big fan. I mean, you go behind me, you can't see them here, they're down below, but I got collections of Peanuts and Hagar the Horrible and all, and you're going back, 60s, 70s, looking at these books, and they're just putting out daily. It's hard enough in this day and age to put out weekly with what we have to do, and these guys pushed daily,
Yeah.
And there's so much stuff, and to keep, and I know as artists pass on in some stories, like with Mort Walker now with Beetle Bailey and stuff, his sons work on it. Right. Hagar, when Dick passed away, his son, who was working on it with him, took over full time. So and to keep it relevant, to keep it still funny, to keep it it's a lot of work.
It is. Yeah.
And to say 10 years is just something to be incredibly proud of.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, thanks.
It's it's a sign of a successful cartoonist. And number one, it also opened the doors for you and led you into all this other work that you're doing. I'm assuming it's what start in a way kind of started your career.
It really did. Yeah. In comics, it definitely did. Yeah. So. And it led to all these things that I wasn't anticipating. Like I never, when I did this webcomic, I kind of did it as more of like developing an IP and doing something in the comic book realm. And it was at the time, like back in 2011, webcomics were booming. Like everyone was doing webcomics, and it was a sort of a different environment. And the way you made money off webcomics is you would do advertising on your site. So you try to get more people to go to your site to get more money from ads. So that was the model, which I was able to kind of make some money at for a while. But with social media, everything's changed. Yeah. So making money in webcomics is really a completely different proposition now.
Oh, totally. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but the good news is what's come up in the meantime is Kickstarter and crowdfunders. So that's kind of really more how you're going to make money versus the ad model. So things have changed a lot. So I feel like in some ways I need to continue to evolve with the way the world's evolving. And also I need to explore different things. So another thing that I found with Hero Business, and I love it, but it's not a kid comic. Like it has a cartoon style, but it's more of the realm of like a Futurama or a Rick and Morty. Yeah. So it's more appropriate for like middle school and teens and up. Yeah. It's not really appropriate for like a 7-year-old.
Yeah, no, I get
that. People come up to my booth and they see the comic, and they'll have a 5-year-old and they'll be like, "Oh," I'm like, "Oh, maybe not."
Yeah, it's
so. I feel like I need to make a line in the sand. Like either I'm doing things that are like the Jetta Raye, which look very kid-like and they're all ages and they're friendly, or I do things that look a little bit more hard-edged.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I will say this, and I have two things. One, I can see kids coming. Your colors are very bright. I can see how they attract kids. But also, I don't think you have to say it's either one or the other. I mean, no. You can make that choice. I choose to do all age stories, even with my humor stuff. When I do like little jokes and like comic strips, and I don't know why Eric would, but when I do like comic strips, I tend to try to keep it like anyone could read. But I have a whole thing here of my jokes. Okay, this is a bunch of jokes I've written the last like 2 years that I still go through. And there's a lot of jokes in there not for kids. Like tons of jokes in there that I've written. So my mind doesn't always stay kid friendly. It's so I have to decide, do I want to create those jokes and try to find the market for them, or just let them sit somewhere?
All right, yeah. I mean, Dan DeCarlo was doing girly comics while he was doing Archie comics.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not like you can't do one or the other. Yeah. I just want to try different things. Like I feel like I need to sort of broaden a little bit, and I've got some ideas for some things I want to do as Kickstarters. Mm-hmm. So I just feel maybe give Hero Business a rest for a little bit, and try to just stretch my wings a little bit on some other things I got on the mind.
Can I ask you, is one of those things on your mind in with the Hero Biz, ever thinking, since you think of it as a sitcom, moving it to something with motion like animation or something?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. I mean, it's sort of primed to be adapted somewhere. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, like I can see these as like, I couldn't see it as a full half-hour cartoon, like a 22-minute, but I can see this as like 8 to 10 minute shorts, just because of like the serialness of it. Like I can see them in short.
Oh yeah. But I would even say like any of the stories, I know exactly how to make them a full half hour. Okay. Like they can definitely be broadened a little bit without.
Yeah.
With pretty much what's there, just sort of expanding a little bit.
Oh no, exactly, and I'm sure you could be done. The way I envision it when I read it, I'm like, oh, this would be great as like a nice short.
Yeah. Well, they are because they're a weekly comic. There is a semblance to them being a little bit like quick and quippy, because each page has to be somewhat accessible, but the whole thing has to read as a story.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I mean the storytelling rhythm would be different if it was.
Oh yeah, exactly.
A show. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So we're coming up to the end. We have about 10 minutes left or so. Let me. I'm sorry. I need another sip. I'm just feeling very hot. My studio that I'm in here, I don't get air conditioning. I have like 3 fans going, so I do apologize. And to everybody who's been watching, this is why I drink so much on here. I get the biggest glass of water, fill it with ice that I can. It's just nuts for me here. But okay, so the Hero Biz. There was one other thing I wanted to ask you. I sidetracked in my head with the water. So before, let me see if I can get it back in my head. So we talked obviously the Hero Biz. We talked Jetta Raye, we talked Stormy, and we talked the moments with Stan. Are there
other projects and broadening horizons and things?
Yeah. Is there just getting back to the comics? Now we got it. You said for Jetta Raye, because I'm excited about that. To basically try to go on the Kickstarter to find out the release date. It might be up there. And the My Moments with Stan has been in some of Bendis's books. So that's just good to know and to reiterate, because those are stories that, like obviously Stan Lee was such an iconic character, something like that. I think just anyone who's a comic fan needs to read that. And honestly, like I said, I didn't know it came out, so I'm gonna go try to look for a copy somewhere. But the Jetta Raye, like, I forgot what year. Do you remember the year she was originally came out? Was it in the 50s?
I think it was the 50s.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh
she
wow.
has a lot of history to it, and there is a Jetta Raye Adventures on Facebook? Because there is a Facebook page, so it's just Jetta Raye
Yes.
Adventures. So if you guys out there who are just watching this don't know anything about Jetta, and by the way, Ray is spelled Raye. If you guys don't know anything about the stuff, go on the pages. They're doing, like, is it daily strips they're doing, or they at least look like daily strips coming out? I see posted.
The daily strips are just like an extra or a little element. They're Archie type styles, so they're mostly, between 5 and 8 page stories.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying, like, I see a lot of like that old classic.
Yeah.
And I think it's beautiful work out there. I mean, I don't know, I forgot the artist's name who's working on it, but it's
Jeff Schultz is the one that you were looking at that did the dailies. Yeah.
And I gotta say, I gotta get Jeff on here. Jeff, we've done shows together. He's a really interesting guy.
Yeah, and I feel he's one of the unsung Archie artists. Like his style and his work is amazing. Like he's, it looks very Dan DeCarlo, and he said that he tries to ape the Dan DeCarlo look when he draws the characters. And he drew Betty and Veronica for years.
Yeah.
And people, I don't know. I feel like he doesn't get as much credit as he should.
Yeah, but and I agree with that. I mean, I don't remember when he was drawing it, but I worked back there in 2001, so I don't remember his name back then. But I know he's done it.
Yeah, I want to say late 90s through early 2000s. I think.
Maybe. I remember one of the books I used to work on a lot. And my job as a production artist was to make sure pencils were erased on the inks, to touch up any lines or add lines if they were missing, because inkers have a tendency not to draw clothing lines on the women as a little joke. So I have to make sure there's a collar on the shirt or something. Make sure the lettering, if there's any spelling errors, to go in and correct that stuff. And I worked a lot on it was Fernando Ruiz's book at the time with Paul Castiglia, Archie's Weird Mysteries.
Oh yeah.
I worked on a bunch, but that was like when those came in, I made sure to pick up those pages because I love Fernando's work.
Yeah.
Paul's a great writer, and it's just one of those things where it's like, I just wanted to read the story too.
Yeah. That's a great premise too. I'm like waiting for somebody to bring it back.
Yeah, well, gotta reach out to Archie. Maybe it's something you can bring back.
I would love to do some work with Archie. So we'll see.
I'm gonna wrap up here because I'll be honest, I can't remember my Hero Biz question.
It's okay.
But I do want to thank you. If you want to hold backstage for a moment, you're welcome to. But I have to thank you for coming on. I really enjoyed chatting with you. Learning more about the work that I didn't know that you were doing, a little bit more about your history. When you have something to promote, I'm going to tell this right now, please come back on. If you want to bring some of the people you're working with on, and we'll just chat about comics and the stories you guys are doing and whatnot. I think it was great. I think the audience really enjoyed tonight. So if there's anything you want to say before I send you backstage, please.
No, just thanks for having me. This has been fun and great chatting with you and catching up. And we haven't really chatted in a while.
Yeah, I mean, shows have disappeared. That's really the only time I see you.
I know, right? Yeah, so it was good. I mean, I missed the shows this year. Yeah. I missed seeing everyone. So this was a nice little coffee chat. Hopefully your audience got something out of it as well.
I hope so. All right, well, thanks. I'm going to send you backstage and wrap up. See you in a bit.
Yep.
All right, guys. So I had a blast. And, I always say it's inspiring when I talk to other creatives. Bill is no different. I've, like I said, been a fan of his work since 2012, I think we said was the first time I saw his work. Just fun. Very bright colors. It's just something you guys need to see and check out on your own. So check out his Instagram, check out the Twitter at The Hero Biz, go to his website, The Hero Biz, and start at the beginning and read the comic because it really is great. And I know I'm a little behind in it because I'm a little behind on a lot of my comics that I read on the web. So I'll get to that. You guys get to it, catch up. And next week I'm gonna have an artist. His name is Robert Feldman. He created Psycho KO. Great book. So I'll see you guys next week with Rob. I'll see you. Have a great weekend, guys. Bye.